Hello, students. Today I'm going to be introducing the first read for The Perils of Indifference, which was a speech given by noted author and Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel. Let's begin with our learning objectives. Our learning objective is, after an initial reading and discussion of the speech, students will be able to identify and restate the key ideas and details. Before we jump into the speech itself, I just want to give you a little bit of historical context for this speech and why it was given. And for that, we need to jump back in time a little bit before the speech was delivered to 1978, when the United States Congress established the annual days of remembrance of the victims of the Holocaust, which we usually just call Holocaust Remembrance Day. In his speech at the first national ceremony, President Carter, who is pictured here in the center, underscored the purpose of Holocaust remembrance, saying that to truly commemorate the victims of the Holocaust, we must harness the outrage of our memories to banish all human oppression from the world. So, in other words, things like the Holocaust should make us angry. They should outrage us enough to want to act to make sure that that kind of stuff doesn't happen. Incidentally, standing next to Jimmy Carter on his left is Elie Wiesel himself, the author that we are about to read for this. So, a little bit more about Elie Wiesel. Well, before I get to that, just a note that Holocaust Remembrance Days are not unique to the United States. There are Holocaust remembrances all throughout the world, and all of them seem to have the same goals of not only commemorating and remembering the Holocaust victims, but also of spreading awareness with the goal of preventing genocide from happening again. And if you're not familiar with the term genocide, it means the slaughtering of a mass group of people, usually based on their ethnicity or on their religion. So now a little bit more into Elie Wiesel. Elie Wiesel was a Holocaust survivor, and he led the commission that founded the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, which is in Washington, D.C. If you ever get a chance to go to Washington, D.C., take the time to visit the Holocaust Memorial Museum. It is a life-changing event, very worth your time. So Wiesel, after surviving the Holocaust, spent the rest of his life speaking out against human rights abuses and calling world leaders to action against systemic violence against ethnic minorities. He was a very public figure in the 1990s during the Kosovo Civil War, where millions of Kosovoans were slaughtered by Yugoslavians as a way of trying to do ethnic cleansing, which is genocide in that nation. In 1986, Wiesel received the Nobel Peace Prize award, which is probably the most prestigious award that you can get. It's a huge honor. And in his acceptance speech, Wiesel said, "I swore never to be silent whenever and wherever human beings endure suffering and humiliation. We must always take sides." And I really like this quote. It reminds me of something that Martin Luther King Jr. might have said, particularly the ending of it. We must always take sides. To not take sides is indifference. That's basically the definition of indifference, to not care. And so the title of this speech sort of gives away what the topic of it's going to be: the perils of indifference. Perils means the dangers, right? Like if we say that our life is in peril, we're talking about danger. And indifference means not caring about something because it isn't happening to you, because it's happening to somebody else. So the danger of not caring about what happens to other people is really what this speech is about. Now, let's go ahead and read the introduction together. I do highly recommend watching this short video trailer, though, before you get over to the speech itself. It does a good job of setting it up. So, reading this introduction. Elie Wiesel was born in the Carpathian Mountains in Romania. At the age of 15, Wiesel, along with his mother, father, and three sisters, was relocated to a confinement ghetto. Real quick, what a ghetto was a certain sanctioned area of a town where the German people would force the Jews to live for a short period of time before they were transferred to concentration camps. In these ghettos, which again, it was usually just like a section of town, Jews were not allowed to go outside of the ghetto. They had to remain inside of the sectioned off area, which was usually sectioned off with like barbed wire fencing. 2 months after being put into a ghetto, his family says they were all shipped to a concentration camp, Auschwitz, where his mother and younger sister were murdered upon arrival. Wiesel and his two older sisters were the only members of his family that survived the Holocaust. He went on to lead a life dedicated to writing, activism, and Judaism. His most famous book, Night, was published in 1960 and narrates his experiences in the concentration camp in vivid detail. If you have not read that book, I offer it as a book club option, and I do highly recommend reading it at some point in your life. It is, I consider it to be one of the most important books that you could ever read. Wiesel was the recipient of dozens of awards, including the Nobel Peace Prize, for his efforts on behalf of victims of ethnic and religious persecution worldwide. In this speech, Perils of Indifference, delivered at the White House before President Bill Clinton, his staff, and members of Congress, Wiesel implores his listeners to follow the kinder nature of their hearts. So before we jump into the letter, make sure that you take a minute to complete the vocabulary drag and drop. There are some words here that you may not be familiar with. Go ahead and get familiar with them. You do not have to do the sample sentences. There's probably going to be more words than this list that you are not familiar with, just to be fair, as you go through the letter. Some of the words that I can think of are like etymologically and pogrom. Those are pretty big words that you may not know. So when you come across them in the letter, if you want to take a second to look them up so you understand them, that might be helpful. Otherwise, try to just understand the context of what's being said. All right, let's go ahead and jump over to the letter, or rather the speech. I do have some discussion questions that you can look through after you've read the speech. I would suggest making sure that you can answer these, whether you do it in your own notebook or whether you do it as a discussion with a partner, but make sure that you can answer these questions. It will be helpful to you. Here is a summary of the speech. Before you get into it, I would highly recommend reading it because then you'll be able to follow the speech a little bit more easily after having read the summary of it. And here is the speech itself. It does have audio. I believe that the audio of this is a little over 11 minutes long, so not terribly long. There are some little information pop-ups on some items that you may be unfamiliar with. You can take a look at those as you go through. But again, there's going to be probably other references here to things that you are not going to be familiar with. Things such as people or places or events that you might not be that familiar with, like Kosovo or leaders like Yitzhak Rabin. Events like the Kristallnacht, where the Jewish people were rounded up to be forced to concentration camps, or other leaders like Slobodan Milosevic. So you may not know those things, and again, you can try to do a little bit of lookup on those things when you come across them so that you can understand them. But most importantly, what we're trying to get out of this, as the learning objective said, is the key ideas and details of this. So don't get too bogged down in references that you don't understand, and instead look for the main ideas that Wiesel is talking about and try to be able to summarize those main ideas in your own words. Once you are finished with this, then you can head over and do the quiz, little multiple choice quiz here, and turn this assignment in. I do want to just mention one more thing about the speech before I let you go. I want you to keep in mind that this is a persuasive speech. This is not an informative speech. It is a persuasive speech because he's trying to persuade the audience. He's trying to convince the audience that they need to take action And in particular, he's trying to persuade the United States government to be more active in helping people. So I just wanted to leave off on that little note. As always, I'm happy to help you if you feel lost, if you are struggling to get through the speech and need me to talk it through with you. I'm happy to do that. Just come talk to me.